Another good word today. Dr. Carroll joins us to explain the practice of philosophical counseling and philosophical health. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Angie.
It's good to see you. Now, I was reading a little bit about this particular practice of philosophy. Where did it all start and how was it used?
Good question. So I guess we could go back to the origins of philosophy to see when this started. Socrates, who was largely considered the father of philosophy, was one who used thinking about meaning and how to live a good life as a way of seeking solace in a difficult world. Later, Seneca, who was a playwright and a statesman, was asked, what is the role of philosophy? And he said, counsel. So from the very beginning, really, philosophy was designed as enacted wisdom, things that we think about and then we do. And it was in the 1980s that a German philosopher named Gerd Achenbach, which is fun to say, he created a practice that he called a philosophical praxis. And it was an opportunity for bridging ancient philosophical traditions with contemporary approaches to well-being. So philosophical practitioners are trained professionals who apply philosophical thinking to help people address life challenges. Because at the end of the day, I don't think most people are living with a diagnosis, which is the world of psychotherapy and psychology and psychiatry, but are really dealing with existential questions. What does it mean to live? What does it mean that we're here? What's the purpose of all of this? These are philosophical questions. And philosophical practitioners help people to come up with their own answers to those questions.
So when you are practicing and you are with a client, how is that shift from maybe a more medical approach, for lack of a better word, or a practical approach? What are the questions you ask in this situation, and how does that then lead the conversation?
Yes, that's a good question. So there is a bit of a critique maybe in that certain aspects of the world of psychology and psychotherapy a lot of that's driven by insurance and a lot of that's driven by pharmaceuticals. And so there need to be certain diagnostics made in order for prescriptions and insurance to cover. So philosophical practice does not see in any way an adversarial relationship with that way of being. It's just very different. And you're exactly right. It has to do with the questions. So whereas in psychology, psychiatry, or psychotherapy, a person might be dealing with issues relative to childhood trauma or abuse or things that have happened to them that they can't really, in a sense, come to terms with or haven't learned to process, which is an incredibly important field. And of course, it's a part of what I practice. So there's lots of room for that. On the other side, in the philosophical world, it's where we're wrestling with a different kind of question. So rather than what do I do or how do I make sense of this thing that happened to me when I was a child or when I was a first responder, a philosophical practitioner would lead a client to asking questions of, what does it mean that I experienced that? Not that life is happening to us and we're victims of circumstances and suffering, but we recognize life is suffering. And we get that from Eastern traditions like Buddhism. And we come to understand, what does it mean to live life with suffering and to recognize that there can be joy in that? What meaning do I ascribe to this thing that happened to me? Rather than how do I recover, what meaning can I ascribe to it? So it's a way of looking, in a sense, kind of for the silver lining. One tradition, philosophical tradition that maybe a lot of people have heard of is Stoicism. We've heard the word stoic, yes. And a lot of people think that means solid, emotionless, still, bland, when really Stoicism is an early form of thinking about how do we apply our emotions in an intellectual way, thinking about how we feel, and then realizing that we actually have some choices about how we feel. There are certain things that we can't control in the world, and the few things that we can, what we think, what we say, what we do, and how we feel, are things that we really need to spend a lot of energy. And so whereas in a psychological or a psychotherapeutic context, we might be asking questions about, trauma and how it impacts our thinking, we recognize in philosophy and philosophical practice that thinking is where your healing is. So how do you change your thinking? How do you live a life that is coherent between what you say you want and what you really want. This is philosophical health, right? It addresses our capacity to cultivate a sense of coherence between our thoughts and beliefs and our actions. And it is believed that the good life is a fruitfully coherent one where what we say and what we do are aligned.
Jonathan, you have given us all lots to think about this morning. Thank you for that complete explanation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angie.
And we'll have more lifestyles for you right after this. Stay with us.